Good afternoon. Welcome to the University of Buffalo Graduate School of Education Dean's Distinguished Lecture. I am Jae Kyung Lee, Dean of the Graduate School of Education. This Dean's Lecture series is designed to engage the university and local education community with distinguished scholars in critical fields of education. First, I'd like to thank the sponsors of this great event. Adele H. Land Memorial Fund, Charlotte C. Aker Fund for Colloquia on Urban Education, and the UB Office of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement for their generous support. I also want to thank all of you in the audience for joining us and supporting the GSE events. The theme of this year's lecture is the future of teacher and school leader education. There have been enormous challenges facing the schools of education across the nation. One of the major challenges was declining student enrollment in teacher education programs. Where are all the teacher candidates gone, and how do we get them back? Another major challenge was increasing expectations for teacher quality under high-stakes, test-driven accountability policy for both pre-service and in-service teachers. The combination of both market and political forces created a perfect storm for the schools of education. When we have a big storm coming, we count on a reliable weatherman to forecast and survive the storm, right? Where is the storm heading? How can we survive the storm? So in this case, the question is, how should we prepare teachers and school leaders to educate children in a rapidly changing society of new demographics and technologies? Although there is no shortage of experts in education, I think there is no more reliable expert than our distinguished speaker today to answer these kinds of futuristic questions and help us rise above the storm. Dr. Arthur Levin is the president of the Woodrow Wilson Foundation. He was a former president and professor of education at Teachers College, Columbia University. He received his PhD from UB with a joint degree in sociology and higher education. Dr. Levin's education and dedication to improving the quality of education has led him to receive numerous honors and 25 honorary degrees. His well-known, famous education school project, the report entitled Educating School Teachers, has had a deep impact on the teacher education policy and practice across the nation. And recently he announced his foundation's plan to work with the MIT for creating a new teachers academy. So he never stops working. We are very proud and honored to host this great lecture. And Dr. Levin's visit to UB means a lot to all of us, particularly our students in GSE who plan to be great educators and education leaders like him. After his lecture, there will be time for Q&A moderated by Dr. Steve Jacobson, UB Distinguished Professor of Educational Leadership and Policy, and a reception will follow afterwards. Now, please welcome our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Arthur Levin.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And I thank you all for coming here on a windy, rainy Monday when the schools are closed. For me, this is just a terrific homecoming. And the people who are here are there are a number of old friends, whether it's Barbara Bunker, or Bruce Johnstone, or Rochelle Pope, or Bill Barba, and so many others, and I apologize for anybody I've left out. The one request I have came from my wife. She asked me not to come home unless I had a beef on weck for her. Okay, I had a startling revelation not long ago about my UB education. The university was very generous and gave me an honorary degree a few years ago. And my advisor, a fellow named Lionel Lewis, gave a talk the night before the degree reception. And he said, you know, Arthur Levine is truly unique. We have never given anybody 2 honorary degrees before. The one I was getting tomorrow and the one I got 30 years before. So, here we go. I had a really good education here, The truth of the matter is probably the greatest tribute I ever paid to it was I stole the entire program when I was head of the higher education program at Harvard. It was just such a good prep program. I only wish I could have stolen the faculty too. Okay, before we get going, truth in advertising, okay? Before I left Teachers College, I used to teach a course roughly, every other year. And the last set of course evaluations I got said this: if I had 20 minutes left to live, I would want to spend them in Arthur Levine's class. Because every minute with Arthur Levine feels like an hour. So by those standards, we got about 2.5 days together. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about 7 forces, make that 6, that have the capacity to transform education schools and universities and teacher education and school leadership. And here they are. The first one's demographics. So the population of the country is aging, moving, coming from abroad, and changing color. What we're seeing is, and you all know this, we're going to see a balloon of retirements as the baby boomers begin their retirements. Teachers, principals, professors, they all need to be replaced. The other thing we're seeing is a new majority in higher education emerging. And what I'm talking about are people over 25 who are part-time and who are largely female. And so we asked them, what do you want out of your college education? What kind of relationship do you want with your college? And the answer we got back was, I'd sort of like it to be like the relationship I have with my electric company, my internet provider, my bank, the supermarket. These are people for whom college is just one of a lot of activities that fill their lives. And when you think about it, it's not even the most important one for them. They're juggling 100 other concerns, relationships, jobs, kids. So I tried to think about this. And I tried to think about what a relationship with a bank is like. What do I want from my bank? I thought about that, and what I want is an ATM on every corner. I want to know that when I get there, there's not going to be anybody else in line. I want my checks deposited immediately, maybe the day before they arrive. And no mistakes unless they're in my favor. I also know what I don't want from my bank. I don't want religious services. I don't want psychological counseling. I don't want intramural sports. Any of those things that I want, I can get for myself. What this new breed of student is saying is they're looking for a college education with 4 characteristics. The first is convenience. Give me classes 24 hours a day, unless you can offer them more frequently. In-class parking wouldn't be bad. In addition, what they want is service. The offices ought to be there to help you. Going to financial aid shouldn't be the equivalent to playing the lottery. The registrar's office shouldn't be playing gotcha. They want all these things to work for them. What they're saying is they want high quality instruction, professors who are up to date in their fields, who know how to teach. And what they're also saying is they want low cost. And they're willing to shop around to find all of these things. So, what's that mean? It means these guys aren't interested in buying electives. They're not going to take them. They don't care about the new gym. They're not going to work out there. And they don't care about extracurricular activities because they're not going to be involved in them. What these guys are looking for is a stripped-down version of higher ed. And they are prime customers for places like Phoenix. They're looking for fast and easy and low cost. And that's going to be real competition for us as that population increases. What's also true is that the population's moving from the northeast to the west and the south. And that's going to have a very large impact on the politics of the nation. What it means is that for the first time, the west and the south now have a majority of our population. They tend to be red, they'll become more purple, but it means that national politics will be dominated by reds rather than blue politics, which will have an enormous impact on education. Beyond that, what we're seeing is people are moving from the cities to the suburbs. And what we're seeing is an increasing isolation of poor people and people of color, not only in the cities, but also in the ring suburbs and in rural areas. And they're coming from abroad. What we're seeing is more languages being taught in our schools. We're seeing fewer students who speak English at home. Immigration has roughly tripled since the 1960s. And finally, what we're seeing is a population in which Hispanics, blacks, Asians are booming. By 2050, as you all know, whites will be a minority in this country. The groups that are growing most quickly, by and large, have been the least successful in our educational system. Our educational system has been the least successful with them. That's going to pose an extraordinary challenge for schools and for school leaders and for teachers. And finally, we're also seeing a booming of students with disabilities. Right now in Greenwich, Connecticut, 19.7% of all students have been diagnosed as having learning disabilities. 1 out of 5. That's not really wholly credible. The fact of the matter is, we don't have a better name for what those students are experiencing. What they really are, they have different learning styles. We don't call it that. For the most part, the diagnosis of learning disabilities entitles students to increased services and to other activities in schools and to enrich programs. As a consequence, we can expect to see disabilities boom in the next few years. Next one, economics. What we are witnessing now is a shift from a national industrial economy to a global information economy. And with that change, and you know these things, we have a decrease in the number of jobs requiring little education. They've gone abroad. There are no jobs for school dropouts. And what we're seeing at the same time is an increase in jobs requiring more education. The result then, so what do you do under those circumstances? What states are doing is raising skill and knowledge levels for students to the highest levels in history. And they're also expecting to see, because of the demands of the economy, substantial rises in graduation rates and decreases in dropouts. Now, that's not even the biggest change that's occurring right now. The biggest change, I think, is this: that industrial societies care deeply about process, and our schools look that way. They are built upon one of the most successful technologies of the industrial age, the assembly line. And what happens is we have 12 years of schooling, batch processing kids at the age of 5 through 180 days of school a year, taking 4 to 5 courses in high school for lengths of time dictated by the Carnegie Foundation in 1906. Now, what we've done in that model is we've fixed time, we've fixed process. All kids are expected to learn the same thing in the same period of time. The focus is on accumulating credits and seat time. Information economies don't care about that kind of stuff. They're focused on outcomes. Time is variable, process is variable. The end result then, and this is a revolutionary change, what we're saying is what matters in education now is not teaching, but learning. What do kids know and what can kids do? That's an entirely different issue, requiring very, very different structures to education. If you throw away time and you say all we care about is that you've learned things, and you're all not going to learn in the same period of time, what then happens is we have an accounting system in education, the Carnegie Unit, which doesn't function in that environment. What we're going to see is, and we're seeing it already, we're seeing states demand standards and outcomes, assessment, accountability, regulation regarding graduation rates and student achievement. Relationship with government. We're going to see a couple of major changes happen that really matter. One is what we're seeing right now. We're going to see a real competition for education dollars. And that's going to be based on demographics, which is the biggest advocates for education dollars were the baby boomers. They were such a large part of our population. Whatever they wanted, they got from government, for the most part. When they were younger, they wanted really good schools for their kids. They pushed that so very, very hard that every candidate running from any office, from President of the United States to dog catcher, had to have an education platform. Well, they don't care about that so much anymore. What baby boomers are going to be asking for, their kids are largely through school. What they're going to be asking for is first for their aging parents, if they're still alive. And what they're going to want is health care and elder care. Older parents take a lot of time and they cost a lot of money. And they're going to ask for government help. Beyond that, what's also going to happen with those students or with those baby boomers is that They're going to ask for senior aid for their parents and then for themselves. And they're going to ask for maintenance and increasing of Social Security. Education won't be high on their agenda. And so what we're going to see happen is a competition for dollars. Do we put those dollars into education, or do we put it into senior citizens? Another thing that's going to happen, and it's happened already, higher education has really changed. It shifted from a growth to a mature industry. And what I mean by that is, in 1947, President Truman created a commission to study the future of higher education. And it came back and it said, you know what we need? We need more education. We need more campuses. We need more faculty. We need more students. We got to increase capacity. And for a very long time, the primary question that government asked of universities, are you growing? Are you increasing capacity? Are you taking more students? But what happened is we've reached the point at which 70% of high school graduates are going on to college or some form of post-secondary education. I can't find a lot of legislators who are saying, that's a good start. Let's get it up to 90. What they're saying now is, this is a very expensive budget item, and we have been cutting it. But what we're going to do is we treat mature industries very differently than we treat growth industries. And what we're going to ask of them is, they be more accountable. Tell us what you're doing with our money. Tell us what you've accomplished. We subject them to greater scrutiny. We regulate them more. We want to know about their effectiveness, their efficiency, their outcomes. We want to know about overlap in their programs and why we're paying for them. We want to know about access. We want to know about graduation rates. We want to know about tenure and why we should keep it. We're going to find government continuing to ask many, many harder questions in the years ahead. I saw this conversation. It was between two presidents of research universities and two governors. One was Governor Hunt from North Carolina, and the other was Tom Kean, former governor of New Jersey. Both were big-time education governors. And they looked at the college presidents and they said, you know what? Your business model is fundamentally broken. It doesn't work. You can't expect to charge whatever you want to charge the marketplace and expect people to pay for it. And the president stared back, shocked. How could anybody say that? And they said, you've asked entirely the wrong question. They said the right question isn't what we choose to charge. The right question is who pays for it. And what they were saying was, we want government to pay more. And what the governors were saying is, we expect you to cut your costs and change your model. We're going to have that confrontation, that conversation continue with very little communication between the competing groups. Third, let's make it fourth. Fourth, technology. My grandmother was born before the airplane was invented, and my kids were born after people landed on the moon. Things are moving really, really quickly today. The pace of change is accelerating. It's deep, it's profound, and it's continuing. Just to get a sense of history, years ago, my younger daughter walked into our kitchen, and there on the table was a letter with the Elvis Presley stamp. She looked at it, and she said, Dad, How did they know what you really looked like? I had to tell you one more thing of that ilk, which is that my younger daughter was in high school and they were studying history. And she came home one day and she thought there's a fantastic chance to humiliate her mother. So Rachel looked at my wife, Linda, and she said, Linda, who she believed knew nothing about contemporary culture and probably didn't know anything about her own culture. So Rachel looked at her and said, Mom, have you ever heard of Woodstock? Shocked that Linda said yes. Even more shocked that Linda said, I was there. Rachel looked at her, not missing a beat, and said, were you the monitor? I'm pleased to be married to the Woodstock monitor. In any case, look, my world is dramatically different than the world that I had when I grew up. Computers, CDs, DVDs, GPSs, ATMs, iPhones, iPods, iPads, light bulbs. Come on. I know I'm not young, but the least you could have done is react to that. Kindles, Twitters, social media, all of that. It's entirely different. I was doing a focus group with college students, and I looked at the group, and I said, how are you doing with this huge snowball of new technologies? And one of the kids looked at me and said, and I thought it was sort of a wise-ass comment. I thought someday this could be a bumper sticker, maybe a t-shirt. And he looked at me and said, it's not technology unless it happens after you're born. And if you think about that, how would you react if I asked you, hey, how are you doing with cars? Those refrigerators really keep your milk cold, don't they? They're just there. They're just facts of life. Technology is going to have profound impact. We can't even see the extent of it. But here are some of the things we do know. Textbooks. They're going to disappear. Instead, what we're going to be able to do is create learning materials using all media, geared to the people who are in that class, and serving the purpose of each professor. One size will no longer fit all. What we're also going to see is, not long ago, I was on an airplane, and I was going from cross country, and I finished the work I brought. I finished the book I was reading. So in desperation, I started reading the airline magazine. And there was a pretty interesting article about the travel agency of the future. And what it said was, you know, we're not going to send you brochures, we're not going to send you to our website. We'll be able to take you where you want to go. You'll be able, through virtual reality, you can walk around the beach. You can walk into your hotel room. You can go to the restaurant, see what it's like inside. If we can do all of those things, and we can do all of those things now, Google Cardboard's only the beginning. What's going to happen is, why can't we recreate 5th century Athens? Why can't we create France at the time of the Revolution, America in 1776? Why can't we take students to 15th century Paris, have them walk around, see the buildings, see the people, smell the smells, which had to have been putrid, there were no sewers. If we can do all those things, how's a stand-up lecture compare to it? Next, it's possible right now for somebody to offer a class here for me to take that class in New York City and for another student to take that class in Tokyo. It's possible for me to nudge my classmate from Tokyo. By the way, we don't all feel like we're sitting in the same room. It's possible for me to nudge my classmate from Tokyo and say, oh, my mind wandered. I missed the last thing the professor said. Translate it into Japanese, back into English, and I'm back in the class. It's possible for the professor to assign me and my Japanese colleague a project for our next class. It's possible for me to ask my Japanese colleague to have tea with me after class. If we can do all of those things, if we can, and we have a population, a new population that's only showing up for class, the new majority, they're not hanging around campus. Why do we need the physical plant called a college? Can we do all of this virtually? And the place I'd look for this, look for it in California. California is expecting a tidal wave of 500,000 new students over the next decade. The universities can't handle them. Not the University of California, not the Cal State system, not the community college system. They have to do something. And it isn't going to involve building more physical campuses. Look for virtual campuses. Look for the rise of new kinds of programs, which are likely to be universal access, low cost, high tech, and competency-based. Fifth, privatization. Education is this really appealing industry to the private sector in particular. What they believe is it's going to be the next healthcare. They think it costs too much, it's low in productivity, it's low in technology use, and it has weak leadership. But they're seeing so many other good things. What they're seeing is, look, in an information economy, higher ed's a growth industry. It's going to keep going. What's also is a long-term purchase. It's not like buying milk. You don't have to buy a container every day. You pay once a semester. What they're also saying is it's counter-cyclical. And what that means is when the economy's bad, enrollments in higher education actually rise. There aren't a lot of industries like that. It's a great offset for other fields. And there's a really dependable cash flow. And it's subsidized. And what we're seeing is a rush by the for-profit sector right into higher ed. And I think that's going to continue and create new competition. Last, convergence of knowledge producers. You know what's happening now? All kinds of knowledge organizations. Television, publishers, museums, software companies, orchestras, libraries. They're all producing similar products. And it looks increasingly like courseware. And they're all trying to reach larger audiences. And they're all using the same technology to do it. At the moment, the biggest provider of science professional development for teachers is PBS. The museum down the block from me is offering a doctorate in astrophysics. More and more of those organizations, but I got to tell you the story. I went to visit a publisher in New York, and I'm sitting in his anteroom, and behind me, there are just all these books on shelves. I'm looking all around. And the guy finally comes out, and he looks at me and he says, you know, we're not in the book business anymore. And he said, we're in the knowledge business. And I think he saw me roll my eyes. You know, what's that even mean? And he said, let me give you an example. He said, we are in I can't remember the number anymore. Let's call it 17,000 schools in the United States, providing professional development and teacher education. There is no university in the United States that has that kind of reach. None. He now had my full attention. At the time, I was president of Teachers College. So I said, I still thought I had an edge. I said, where are you getting your content from? Thinking he had to come to us. And he said, oh, I hire full-time content providers. And I thought about that for a few moments. I don't know anybody who's a full-time content provider. My parents didn't have any friends who were full-time content providers. My next-door neighbors aren't full-time content providers. So I turned to the guy and I said, what's a full-time content provider? And he told me, and I realized we just had different names for it. He called them full-time content providers, and I called them professors. Only he could give stock options and bonuses, and the faculty at TC were too smart to take that from me. Okay, I still thought I had an edge. And I said, what about credits and degrees? He said, we're still working on it. They're not working on it anymore. They have degree granting authority and the capacity to offer credits. We're going to see more and more and more organizations like that enter the education world. So what do we say about all this? What's going to happen? I don't know, beats me. Do you have questions? Okay, here's what I think is going to happen. And remember, this is unvarnished speculation. Take it or leave it. What I think we're going to see is profound, continuing, and accelerating change in higher education in K-12. But the thing that's really important to understand, it's not unique to us. Every other industry is going through it. The fact is, they were all created for a national analog industrial economy and are now having to make the transition to a global digital information economy. So you sort of look at it and say, oh, government doesn't work that well. Healthcare has got some problems. Media has difficulties. You know, financial institutions are problematic. I once had a conversation with then Mayor Giuliani in New York. And he told me how terribly the schools were doing, what an awful job they were doing, and how badly universities were doing. And I really got angry. And I looked at him and said, you know, your business is in the same shape as mine. You think that people who are in schools are less able than they used to be, less caring, and doing a much worse job. We think the same thing about people in government. You tell me people are withdrawing from schools. They're going to private schools. They're going to the suburbs. But we're withdrawing from politics. We're not voting. You tell me you don't want to give us money. We don't want to give you money either. You tell me you hate tenure. And I'm telling you we want term limits. You're telling me that you don't like unions, and I'm telling you we hate political parties. I said, you know, we both want the same thing. We both want a business guy running the other guy's industry. And both those things happened in New York City. We got a business mayor and a business head of our school system. But Mayor Giuliani never met with me again. Okay. Second change that we can expect to come out of all of this. How change is going to occur. It's going to occur by repair, fixing the existing organizations, and replacement, creating new kinds of organizations take their place. In the private sector, we tend to make the changes by replacement. The Huffington Post is now worth more than the Washington Post and the Boston Globe combined. In education, we tend to make the changes by repair, trying to fix the existing organizations. Both are going to happen. We're going to see replacement organizations in education, and we're going to see prodigious efforts to try to repair the existing organizations and move them into the new economy. One of the tragedies right now is that we're doing both at the same time in the schools. So what we're telling schools is, look, we want you to keep the old model. What we want you to do is keep time constant, keep process constant. And at the same time, we want to fix outcomes. You can't do all three of those things. You can pick any two. There has to be variation to allow for the third. We're putting them in a terrible place. And if you think about it, let's look at teacher ed. Right now, we are doing repairs. And the way in which we're doing repairs are we're establishing standards. We're demanding data. We're demanding accountability. We're arguing with unions over tenure and pay for performance. All those are changes in the basic model. But we're also replacing it at the same time. We're introducing alternative routes to become a teacher. We're seeing alternative providers, KIPP, TFA, for-profits, libraries, all those other organizations I talked about are all getting into the teacher education and school leadership market. The GRADE Act, which was part of the new federal ESSA regulations that replaced No Child Left Behind, allow for the creation of academies that would do teacher education and school leadership rather than universities. All of these things are happening and they'll continue to happen. And some of them are conflicting. Government's running in both paths at the same time. To increase the quality of teachers, they're raising standards. To increase the number of teachers, they're lowering standards and creating alternative routes. So where are we? Third change. They're going to be a significantly expanded and more diverse set of educational providers. Right now, there are 89,000 schools in this country. They're public, they're private. The overwhelming number are not-for-profits. In the years ahead, they're going to be joined by large numbers of for-profits. And a new breed, the not-for-profits, which we talked about, libraries, museums, zoos, encouraged by the openness of the education market. There'll be schools that bridge countries. There'll be hybrids of public and private, for-profit, not-for-profit schools. That mix is on its way and is already well on its way. Fourth, higher education, education in general, are going to take three forms. We're going to see brick, buildings of the kind we have now, campuses. We're going to see click, online education, and we're going to see a blend. The most difficult place and the greatest competition is going to be for click. We don't yet know what blend means. And brick institutions are feeling a great deal of pressure, particularly in New England, the Middle Atlantic states, and the Midwest, where demographics are awful. What we're going to see is more choice, a sixth change, more choice, education, anytime, any place, any learning style. And what that means is it's going to be all kinds of education. What it means is it's going to be different lengths of time. It's going to be different places. You can get it on this. You can get it on the train, on your commute, on your vacation, in your house, at your job, anywhere you want it. It's available to you, your employer. Once we're out of the business of all education being 15 weeks and 3 credits, we're left with a huge, huge, extraordinary array of different kinds of educational experiences. When that happens, it's going to cause another change, which is we're going to move from a focus on time to a focus on outcomes, from teaching to learning. What we're going to see is education become more outcome-based and individualized. Assessment's also going to change. At the moment, high-stakes tests are problematic. For the most part, they come too late. Imagine if your GPS worked the way high-stakes tests work. Okay, so every hour, you would get a reading from your GPS. Okay? And you started off and you were 12 miles from where you're going, but at the end of this hour, you're now 42 miles from where you're going, and you're going in the wrong direction. Recalculating. That's, of course, absurd. But that's pretty much what we do with testing now. I think we're going to see testing become much more like your GPS. Inbuilt, entrenched in the kind of instruction we do, and giving students real-time feedback on how well they're progressing, where they're going, and the kinds of mistakes they're making. What I also think we're going to see, an eighth change, we're going to see lifelong education increase in volume, and we're going to see an important change. Right now, much of our education focuses on just in case. Study these subjects for your degree just in case you need them. We're going to find more and more students coming to universities and other providers for just-in-time education. I need Swahili by Thursday. Teach me that subject. We're also going to see, I think, a ninth change, is that as education becomes more individualized, time more variable, providers increasing in number, I think what we're going to see is the rise of badges, competencies, and other measures of achievement in education, and a diminishment in the importance of degrees. And finally, what I think will occur is we'll have lifelong transcripts indicating all of the experiences that we've had in education throughout the course of a career, throughout the course of a lifetime. So what are the implications for schools, for leaders, for jobs, for teachers, for educators? Are going to live their lives in two worlds. One that's dying or diminishing, and another that's being born. Once upon a time, it was sufficient to prepare leaders who could manage well, our educational institutions. It was important to provide teachers who know how to lead a classroom. That's not what we need anymore. We don't need managers. We need now our leaders who will be charged with moving schools and colleges into a global digital information economy. And they'll have to do that at exactly the moments we talked about. They'll have to do that at a time in which education will demand the highest levels of skills and knowledge in history, at a time in which graduation and achievement have to soar to feed the economy, at a time in which learning is going to trump teaching, individualized, personalized education will trump one-size-fits-all. Time will be variable, not fixed. What we're going to see is a multiplicity of instructional technologies based on tools that allow each student to meet his or her instructional needs. I think teachers are going to change in role. Increasingly, they're going to be required to be diagnosticians, prescriptors, facilitators, and assessors. Accountability based on outcomes will become the dominant rule of education, not process or inputs. So we're going to need, I think, our teacher education programs, school leadership programs that can meet the needs of the times and the professionals who are in those fields. What we're going to need is an education that's very, very different from what we're doing today. One of the things we're doing right now is we're trying to create a brand new education school, a graduate school of education at Woodrow Wilson with MIT. It'll be a competency-based graduate school, throwing out the clock that'll only prepare teachers and school leaders. One of the goals is to create it as a showroom in which everything is open source and education schools can take whatever they like anywhere in the world. In some ways, I increasingly feel like Rip Van Winkle these days. The whole world is changing around us. And it's not because we did anything wrong. We did most things right. It's just the world changed. Our model worked, and it worked for a very long time. It doesn't work anymore, given new realities. So what do we do? In 1827, the state of Connecticut went to Yale College and said, your curriculum is completely worthless. You're teaching your students the trivium and quadrivium as we enter an industrial age. This is terrible. We're not going to support you anymore. So Yale did what universities do whenever they're in trouble. They created a committee. And that committee, in 1828, issued a report, which for some reason has come to be called the Yale Report of 1828. In any case, it asked, should we change fast or should we change slow? Should we change a lot or should we change a little? And the conclusion was, those are the wrong questions. The right question is, what's the purpose of a college? What's the purpose of a school? What's the purpose of a program? That's the question we need to ask, given the tools, the realities, and the times in which we live. Great. I think this is a scary and a daunting moment with so much in flux. History is written by looking backward, not by living through it. So the reality is that no generation, and this is a good thing, no generation in modern history has had the opportunity that we have to put our stamp on the future of education, determine what it looks like for the years to come. That is an extraordinary opportunity. And I think that future, I think that planning, I think that design should begin in Buffalo. Buffalo should be the leader in making these things happen for America and education across the globe. That's the challenge. That's the opportunity. And I wish us all luck in doing it because the future depends upon it. Thank you all very much. Thank you. All yours.
Thank you, Arthur. Is this on? Hello? Okay. And you need to get yours and turn it on, from what I understand. Thank you for a very provocative conversation, and here's the way we're going to use the next period of time. If you have questions for Dr. Levine, come on down to the 2 mics on both sides of the aisle. And while you're all running down to do that, I'm going to lead in with a question to get us started and maybe provoke it. And I want to tie together the last thing you talked about, which was purpose. And my work is in the area of school leadership and preparation of school leaders. And I think the question I have also relates to law schools. And I've come to wonder, what is the purpose of the programs in school leadership when in New York State alone, we are providing more certified administrators than there are positions on a yearly basis? In other words, our programs have become insensitive to the labor demands out in schools. So what's the purpose of a school of education in perpetuating this? Because we have, just in the Western New York area, if you want to be a school leader, you can prepare at 7 different institutions just in Western New York. And we don't have that many jobs. So this initial conversation, anywhere, anytime, bring in more people, seems to be completely free market driven and totally insensitive to the labor market. So who benefits? And I guess part of what I'm suggesting is maybe the university is doing it for its own reasons. So let me pass that over, but please encourage people to come on down. And
A very quick response on that one. Actually, I can't do anything very quickly, but a response on that one is that degree production by universities isn't tied to the marketplace. The assumption, at least in most cases, the assumption is that students determine marketplace output with their feet, and that if jobs aren't available, students won't go take those majors. That has been an imperfect mechanism for determining educational demand. So that in education schools, we turn out a gazillion elementary school teachers, even though there are no jobs for elementary school teachers. We don't turn out nearly enough math, science, technology, engineering teachers, even though there's an incredible demand. We just don't tie it to the marketplace. There are some countries that are more successful in doing that. They have something called numerus clausus. And what that is they admit, according to labor market demand, and the situation that we have would never be allowed to occur there. And I guess I feel we'd lose something if we move toward that. But if we don't do something, higher education doesn't do something, I have no doubt that we'll see government intervene and help us get there in terms of producing graduates. Educational administration is one of those anomalies. One of the things that happens with teachers is they get a salary bump for getting a master's degree. So, what that means is, at least now, what that means is that 50% of the people, according to the research I did, who are taking degrees in educational leadership, educational administration, never intend to become principals or school leaders. They're going to stay teachers and they just want a salary bump. And unfortunately, educational leadership has a reputation as being the easiest way to earn a master's degree. And we studied a lot of programs around the country. And one of the things we found was that even at schools whose names are thought of as highly selective elite institutions, that they have really weak educational leadership programs. We found one at a top university that had 100 doctoral students and 1 part-time instructor. He was very good. He was a school superintendent during the day, which is how they got 100 students. So in any case, an elite institution, The premium and ed programs tend to be fast and easy. And we need to change that. And it's starting to change in a number of states. So that Indiana, Michigan, and I think Ohio, that I'm not sure, I know Wisconsin, have all gotten rid of the salary bump that comes with a master's degree. And I think that'll continue to be adopted around different states in the union. Does that begin to get at any of what you said?
Yes.
Maybe we can go out for a drink later.
Let's do it now. Come on, folks. We have somebody coming, a few folks coming.
Hey, I'm going to ask for a favor. I know some of you, I don't know all of you. Tell me who you are and tell me what you do around here.
I'm Margaret Salee. I'm a faculty member in the higher education program.
It's an excellent program. I've heard great things about it. If I could go to any program in the country, that would be it.
Well, excellent. That's what we tell our students too. So my work focuses on faculty work, and I'm just curious what you think the implications are in terms of what you've laid out, what the implications are for faculty work. It seems like there's a lot of unbundling of roles that are going to be happening, and so what does that mean, especially for folks who work at research universities?
Well, that one's simple. I don't know. But what I expect to happen is, I mean, even when we went from an agrarian to an industrial society, we didn't get rid of everything that existed. We changed some of what existed, so we still kept colleges. We still kept liberal arts colleges. We created whole new means of education to supplement them. We created universities, which would do advanced studies, which was specialized, which engaged in research. We created technical institutes like MIT for the industrial age. We created normal schools to prepare teachers. We created land-grant colleges that spanned both worlds. And we created two-year colleges to bring it to local communities, then called junior colleges. So what all this says is that, one, I've been talking while I've been trying to think of an answer. And the second thing it says is that what we can really expect to happen is some that's familiar will remain. I think the institutions that are greatest risk are, again, small, private, low endowment institutions in Midwest, Middle Atlantic states, New England. I think that regional universities, which have very high proportions of the groups that I talked about, over 25 part-time and female, will find that they have real competition from online programs. And I think you're right. We're talking about piranha economics. We're talking about for-profits trying to snap up parts of not-for-profits. They're going to come and they're going to go after English composition. They're going to come and they're going to go after the MBA program. They're not going to go after the doctoral program in physics. They're going to go after high-volume programs that are low in cost. So what I think is going to happen is faculty roles are going to change. And they're going to change depending upon the kind of institution that one's associated with. I know this much. My daughter's a professor. She is tenure track in geology at Appalachian State. She's not going to live in the same world that I lived in as a faculty member. And the realities I've described will definitely affect us in terms of the accountability, in terms of new kinds of institutions. I think it's just going to be a much different kind of role. But we're still going to need scholars to do the kind of research that's at the center of advancing any society. Sorry I couldn't do better.
Hi, my name is Nancy Wellenzone, and I work for Canisius College. And hi, Steve, how you doing? I'm Dean Manuel. I'm the Associate Dean over at Canisius College, and I also teach in the Ed Leadership Program, so I'm very familiar with the large volume of students that we prepare and what they do with it after, because I ask them, and most of them do it for the salary bump, I think. I think probably only half of them think they're actually going to get that school building role and continuing on. And I think that that's okay, because those skills help them, I think, to be better teachers. They become more familiar with using standards and more familiar with making themselves accountable and making themselves improve, instructional in the K-12 environment. The question I have, though, is how much of this are we going to push down to the K-12? I mean, right now you've got so many other issues. You've got your special ed, you've got your discipline issues, you've got your motivational issues, and not everybody is going to want to take the carrot and follow it and learn as much as they can and come up with the outcomes. I work with postmasters people. They all want it. They migrated with their feet from a land, ground, brick and mortar to an online program, and I found that the work is just as high quality as it was before. And they're totally different populations. I'm wondering how this will work down in the K-12. Or is it pieces? Is it gradually? Do we train them in module format? How to do this a little at a time so when they get up there, they're ready to do it. So, all right, everybody, I just told everybody. All right, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
What typically happens, and the end of the question,
Okay.
is this going to go to K-12? Yeah, it's already going to K-12. And it started in K-12 before it started in higher education. We've been asking for all these outcomes. We've been holding people accountable. We've been trying to tie their salaries to achievement. All that's going to be there. We can't figure out how to do it yet.
I know.
And what'll happen is we'll bumble around. And it's the way change occurs, which is to say there'll be a large resistance. Remember, we didn't do anything wrong. Why are you asking this of us?
I know. Maybe
And-
it takes some kids 2 years to do. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe biology is a 2-year class for some people, but they still can get the 90 after 2 years. We're not set up for that.
No,
you know.
we're not. And what'll happen is we'll do lots of experiments. It's what happened in higher education during the industrial era. We tried all kinds of new subjects. We tried all kinds of new structures. We tried all kinds of new curriculum. Most of it fails because it's a guess at what's going to work. We create models. In higher education, there's places like Johns Hopkins, the first grad school. There's places like Cornell that offered any person any study. And what we'll also do is we'll debate this heatedly, angrily, fighting for the soul of our schools and our colleges. And in the end, the models get better and better by successive approximations.
The
we-
hard part would be able to find places that will let us try these things, because right now K-12 is pretty rigid.
I think it's going to be forced on K-12.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about next week.
No, I know.
I mean, all institutions change. If you want to understand in some ways what's going to happen in education, look sideways. There are other industries that have faced exactly the same pressures we are. They've just been forced to move more quickly. And the best example I can think of is the one I offered when we began. Look at newspapers. If you don't move fast enough, you get replaced. And that's what I'm thinking is the kind of future we're facing. And again, it's slow. It's not like the Berlin Wall falling one day. We'll see a slow evolution, but we will surely change.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Pope. I'm also in that terrific higher ed program that we were talking about. I have a question. I remember we were at TC, that University of Phoenix came to us and said that they wanted in. In fact, you described it as them having their face to our window, trying to get in, and you said no at that time, that we understood that this was coming, but this wasn't going to happen here and now, not in the way that they wanted. And when I do look sideways at some of those industries that this is happening, I look at they're not doing it based on technology, but the prison system, and how they thought getting a business model into the prison system would be better, be more accountable. And that has some serious problems. We also look at the for-profit industry in education right now, and there's a lot of concerns and problems, and they're not quite there yet. In fact, if we, and if we also look at the publishing industry and we look at books, Kindles and things like that, we're seeing as many, there hasn't been the quick changeover that we saw in newspapers. The people are still preferring both. I mean, you still read the Kindle and the hard copy. And so that's what I hear you saying in terms of time, how long this is going to take, that it's not going to happen overnight. But your prediction for who's going to create that better model? Can we do it ourselves? Or is it going to be the external producing it?
Historically in higher education, it's been the external that produced it. But I think largely because we dragged our feet. And there have been leaders that have done extraordinary things. Charles Eliot at Harvard, the guy was there from 1869 to 1909. When he came, there was one elective course. When he left, there were 2 required courses. He remade legal education. He remade medical education. He created accreditation. He set the standards for the modern high school. The thing that he brought to Harvard was that he had come originally from Harvard Scientific School, the Lawrence School of Science, which was an experimental college that Harvard set up. And once it was set up, they just hated it. The professors who were teaching at it, they're not real professors. They're not like us. And the students, not like ours. They saw it as a second-class institution that failed. Eliot was a professor in the Lawrence School and was denied promotion at Harvard and went to MIT. When they brought him back, Harvard was suffering real problems. So they essentially brought a reform-minded person from outside. It's very hard for any priesthood to reform itself. But we have the capacity to do it. And we should do it. And one of the things we could do is bitch about all the changes that are occurring and talk about those that we don't like and talk about those things that are being foisted upon us in our schools. Or the other thing we can do is change it. Give us the suggestions that'll change tomorrow. Give us the programs to create the future. I would much rather they come from higher education than from outside. I'd much rather they come from education than government. We're just not taking advantage of the moment, and we could.
Scott, again from this morning, thank you, from the LAI department, PhD student. Thanks for your scary talk. And with your projections in mind, what are some really interesting job opportunities for ed faculty and education researchers outside of universities?
God, I hope I didn't drive you there. Are you going to get your Vita type now? I think there's never been a better time to be in education. This is an extraordinary opportunity. If you can dream it, you can do it. What we need are creative leaders. We need creative research. There are a lot of places you can do it. You can do it in universities, which will still give you the greatest freedom. You can also do it in think tanks. You can also do it in government. You can also do it in the private sector. All those things are open. And it's a question of what you want to accomplish in terms of a career and where you'd like to pursue it. So the one thing we really, really need in education now are really smart people who want to move to a future and have the imagination to conceive it.
I'm a school librarian, and what I see in elementary school and public schools are teachers who are so demoralized because private industry is filling the void and testing is coming in that doesn't accurately measure achievement or learning, and schools are implementing these credit recovery programs, which are basically cheating so that their graduation rates go up. I mean, the whole thing is being driven in a terrible direction. So we're talking about this business model, but the reality, what's going on now, is just, you talk about time, like, you're talking about being in higher education and all these, research tank, but the classroom, children's lives are being changed right now. Like, I'm not sure what I'm asking, except I'm very disturbed by listening to this and not feeling that, the connection with the real world, that children are coming out of these schools now. This isn't an assembly line where widgets are poorly produced and, these are lives being damaged right now. So it's.
I'd like to believe I'm really pragmatic, as opposed to somebody who's painted a world that's all dark for tomorrow. I guess what I'm talking about is we're a transitional generation between worlds. And that's not a bad thing. In terms of the kids, when I got to Woodrow Wilson, I'd written a series of reports about the condition of ed schools in America. And they ended up being much more critical than I thought they would be when I started the study. And you know what? Anybody can throw bricks. The question I asked myself was, how do you fix it? And we had two choices. You could repair the existing organizations, or you could replace them. And I think both are essential, so that when we talk about repair, we have the kids you're talking about right now. How do we make their schools better? How do we get them the quality of teacher they need? How do we provide the professional development to their current teachers? How do we do those kinds of things? What we're going to find, I think, by focusing on repair, is that that's immediate. That's right now. Let's fix what we have while we invent whatever is going to be created in the future. But my thought right now, and boy, I hope this doesn't sound bad, I really believe in Schindler's List kinds of change, which is save as many as you can, help as many as you can. I've become much more pragmatic in my old age. I don't have time to be Don Quixote.
Sounds like Sophie's Choice rather than Schindler's List.
Please don't take it that way. And what I'm saying is, yeah, it's hard. It can be fixed. Do you know what the other thing is? It's easy to get mired in what's happening everywhere. Say, oh my, this is what's happened to the educational system. Oh my, this is what's happening to higher education. Focus on your own institution. What can you do to make your school a better place? How do you make that happen? What do you do to make a university function in this environment? You're here. How are you going to make here better? Still, huh? What's stopping you?
Thank you, Dr. Levine, for your visionary talk. All of what you have said, I support. I think it's...
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
However, there's always a however. I'm a graduate of UB, and I have been a teacher educator at a small university in Southern Ontario for the past 22 years in science education. And over those 22 years, I have seen little difference in terms of the comments made by my students after they come back from a teaching practicum. Joe, we like what you said during our lecture. We're inspired by what you pronounce as good science education pedagogy, but we're not seeing it in the classroom. Now, some are seeing it, but many are coming back saying, they're telling us, don't listen to them. They really don't know what they're talking about. They don't know the realities of the classroom. And here's what classroom really is about. It's about classroom management. It's about using a textbook well. We're talking high school science and elementary school science. And much of what I see when I go out to work with my students is the same approaches to education that I saw when I was a teacher beginning in the 1970s, late 1970s. Much of it has not changed. I'm not saying that we're doing a bang-up job in a teacher education facility either. Much of what we're doing hasn't changed all that much. But I see the biggest problem is the lack of juxtaposition between what we see maybe as good pedagogy and what's happening in the schools. And I'm not blaming the schools. I'm saying that's the reality. I think much along the lines of what this woman has said is there are pressures, external pressures facing many of the teachers that are beyond their control. So I see it as problematic. I see us not moving forward very quickly. I see us looking in the rearview mirror for many years, much as the GPS, and not making the changes for the time that's now, because we're not working collaboratively as education faculties and schools. I see the need for us to really come together in order for this change to happen. The technology is there in the schools, but it's not being used effectively, and there are, again, external pressures for why it's not. So I'm wondering how we can manage to work cooperatively as institutions of higher learning, teaching, training, and teachers, and working in schools to make these changes happen.
Let me tell you a story, which is, and finally I get to tell you something good, okay? Which is that the Woodrow Wilson Foundation has a STEM teacher education program, and we provide fellowships. But the real goal of the program was to strengthen STEM teacher education program at universities. The program focused on whole states. One of the shockers to us was, and it's in Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, New Jersey, and Georgia. One of the real shockers for us was that very small numbers of STEM teachers can make an extraordinary difference in a state. So we found that by preparing 120 STEM teachers a year, we could fill every vacancy in Detroit, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Benton Harbor, Battle Creek, and Muskegon. 120. So that's one. You can really do things at scale. Two, we found was that going into a state, we'd form a coalition. We didn't do it alone. The governor had to invite us. We had to arrange for the governor to invite us. We formed a coalition with the governor, the chief state school officer, the state higher education executive officer, legislators on both sides of the aisle, universities, schools, unions, other stakeholders, and philanthropy. And here's why we wanted it. Because programs come and go every day. A state higher education executive officer decides, I've got a program, and he sells it to some university dean. And in a year or two, they're both gone. And so is the program. By creating this coalition, what happens is, when people leave, you just replace them in the coalition. And the program stays. What also happens is we have all the players at the table. It means decisions get made involving everybody. When a university prepares a new program and it says, the state won't allow us to do it, The state's sitting at the table and says, yeah, we will. Next step, we go to universities, and we're working with 28 universities in the 5 states. And what we do is we tell them, we'd like you to create a new STEM teacher education program. And we want it to have the following characteristics. We want it to be clinically intensive, field-based. What we're looking for in this program, we want students there 4 days a week the first semester, 5 the second. We want you to adopt the school calendar for your students. We'd like you, to the extent possible, to move coursework into the schools. What we ask for on top of that is that there be a targeting particular school districts that you're going to work with. And we agree to that with the university that we work with. And the goal is produce the teachers the school district needs, not the ones the university thinks they need. Second or third, I don't know what ingredient we're up to here. Next ingredient, arts and sciences and education come together. And they create content from the arts and sciences, pedagogy from education, and we create joint programs involving the Ed School and the College of Liberal Arts. Next, we require 3 years of mentoring once the people graduate. And we bring people together continuously after graduation, during the entire course of their program together and well after they graduate, keeping that network alive. And we also require third-party evidence-based assessment. Of the 28 universities that we're working with, oh, I ought to say one other thing. We asked the president of the university to sign a memo of understanding detailing what will happen by what date and who will do it. We asked the superintendent of the public school district to do the same thing. We give them 18 to 21 months to change their program. If they're not successful, and we offer a series of fellowships, we will offer you 15 fellows for your program with fellowships if you create a program that meets our criteria. If you don't get any of the fellowships. But more than that, you do get a phone call from the governor to the president, or a phone call from the philanthropy to the president. We've only needed to do that twice. What we've done is, when we've recruited people, and it's not only when we go to a university, the people we've asked to become involved with us, we ask the president, the provost, the deans. We ask the faculty in the departments. And when we ask the faculty, we ask to do it alone. Don't want any administrators there. And we ask one important question. Do you really want to do this? Do you really want to create this program? We think you have the potential to create a world-class program. Do you want it? There are a few schools that have told us no. And we say we'll take full responsibility. You won't be asked to invite it into the program, and we'll never explain why. We talk to superintendents, and we ask them, what universities do you like to hire from and which don't you? We talk to teachers. We look at alums in the school. We look at the track record. The end result is, of the 28 schools that we're working with, all of them have met the letter of what we're asking for. Probably about half to two-thirds have met the spirit, which is at a higher level. But I'm convinced that you can change schools successfully, change education programs successfully. It just doesn't happen quickly. The program I described to you takes 8 years. 18 to 21 months to change the program, 3 cohorts of students coming to the school, 3 years of mentoring after, and then having the legislature adopt the program and the governor sign on. It's a doable thing. We've done it in very conservative states like Indiana in Ohio. We've done it with major research universities, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, the Ohio State University. I think you can do it. It's painstaking. It requires a lot of planning. It doesn't happen by accident. You need to build coalitions. You need to provide incentives. You need to make this, I used two terms this morning. One was, you need to make this compatible with what I believe. You can describe any reform as being terribly radical and turn me off. Or you can describe a reform as being consistent with my values and beliefs. You need to do that. And the second thing you need to make a reform is profitable. If you can make it profitable for my unit, then we get better students. Maybe we're getting good press. Who knows? But nice things are happening to the unit. I will allow the change to occur. If you can make it personally profitable, whatever I want, maybe I want new friends. Maybe what I want is an article about me in the local newspaper. Maybe what I want is a bonus. Anything I want, if you can give that to me, you will have made this personally profitable. The job of the reformer is to build the compatibility, to build the profitability, and to create the coalition to keep it alive. That's more positive, isn't it?
Actually, I was asked in my role of moderator, and I'll just check to be mindful of the time because Dr. Levine has a plane. 5:30 was the, is that right? Okay, so I'm sorry, Yanina, we've run. You want to take, if you're comfortable with it, yeah, go right ahead then.
Just really briefly, I'm very interested in your new initiative in terms of your new graduate school of education. And I wonder whether you could briefly talk about it. How is it different from some of the top graduate schools? In what ways, in terms of infrastructure or its mission?
I think what makes it different is that it really is competency-based. And what we're saying is, look, all that matters is, here are the skills and knowledge that we think you need to be a successful starting teacher, to be a successful starting school leader. And we began with work by Charlotte Danielson. Charlotte Danielson has been writing about teacher education, and she joined us for this project. We took those competencies, we grounded them in the disciplines, we grounded them in practice with practitioners. And then what we did was, I said we threw out the clock, we really did. For the challenges, we created for the competencies, we created a curriculum built around challenges. Each challenge includes 3 to 5 competencies. Competencies don't exist independently. They're inextricably intertwined. It's not a checklist. Can you do this, that, and the other thing? You have to be able to do them together. And what happens is the curriculum for each of the challenges, some of it looks very traditional. It's lectures and readings and seminars. And some of it is simulations, simulating a real classroom, games, other kinds of cases, creating a real school that students work in simulated fashion. And some of it's the clinical experience they have. By and large, most of the challenges are met and demonstrated in practice. Not all of them. For instance, whether you know the discipline you're teaching in is not a matter of practice that we can do by paper and pencil. So what makes this different is that it's problem-based. What makes it more different is that it's based on competency. What makes it more different is that there's no period of time, there are no credits, there are no number of courses that you have to take. What you have to do is achieve the competencies. So if you went through this program, God, you'd get through it in 15 minutes. And me, this could be a lifetime of activity. The notion is you do this as long as it takes to to master the skills and knowledge. That's a very different kind of model. It's learner-based and learning-based. And again, what we want to do is, we don't want this to be viewed as a competitor for higher education. We want this to be viewed as a resource center. Every university I know is talking about competency, blended programs, simulations, badges, all kinds of stuff. But it's very hard to do these things in an existing organization. We're going to try them, and you can come and look at them. And if you like them because they're open source, just take them. We're going to do one other thing. We're going to have an R&D lab. And the purpose of the R&D lab is intentional experiments, as well as diffusion. So if we were going to give this to universities by basis of open source, imagine if you do an experiment, you admit a class, and a third looks like Teach for America, and a third looks like Career Changers, and a third looks like traditional ed school students. How long does it take them to graduate? Do they graduate? Once in the classroom, what can we say about student achievement? What can we say about retention in the profession? And our goal for this research is to share it with policymakers. I told you we formed coalitions in different states. One of the things that's become quite usual is that we get called up by legislators and educational administrators and even governors for advice on policy in education. We want to use all that research to reach those audiences. So if we can change, if we can affect policy, and we can affect practice. And last, we're creating programs for school districts we're working with. And the goal there is to help prepare their master teachers. And when we prepare them, we want to create a nest that's comfortable for the students that we have, and they'll welcome them. We also want to begin to move the senior teachers in the direction of competency. And last we want is to build a hunger on the part of those schools to hire teachers prepared in the same fashion ours are, and to ask other universities to do the same thing we are. So it's a three-legged strategy of being open to practice and encouraging practice, trying to shape policy, and trying to improve the climate for that kind of change in schools. I'll let you know whether any of it works. And MIT is terrific. It's like being at a candy store, with the exception the candy tells you whether you can buy it. So that what happens is you say, I want to build this on a spine of cognitive learning, adult cognitive learning. They say, fine, we'll bring 4 people together and we'll help you do that. Terrific. You say, you know what we want? We want to ground our competencies and disciplines. Fine, we'll assemble a group of people who can do that. You know what? We want to work on simulations. Fine, let's put together a team of postdocs, docs, and a faculty member to work on this issue. So we want, another example would be technology. We needed a platform for this. And we called in an outside consultant, and they convinced us there was no platform that worked for us. So we thought we'd end up constructing a new platform. When MIT said, you know what we can do for you? We can create a flexible platform which will tie all the features of existing platforms that you want together seamlessly, so you can go from one to the next, and students will never know that we passed from one to the next. It's those kinds of services that make this an extraordinary opportunity for us. It may have been a short question, but it sure was a long answer. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.